Hey there. Let's just get right into the talk. I'll introduce myself in a bit, but I want you to get a concept of what we're trying to do. So the web is built upon the principle of communication. This makes it very important that information is sent from one part to the other and isn't interrupted or distorted by the time it gets to point B. When you look at this image on the screen, you can see that this is an elephant. But then somewhere along the line, it looks as if the elephant has more than 4 legs. And this becomes a problem because if we leave it up to the interpretation of the user, this might not really be a normal elephant. Wouldn't it be better to have a drawing where it is clearly stated what is trying to be communicated from point A to point B so that the user understands better? Even better, imagine if we could take the user through the process of creating this information from point A so that when it gets to point B, it's nothing new or it's nothing so different from what is in point A. Today, we're going to be talking about improving the web visually with emphasis on A11Y for accessibility. My name is Obinna Ekwuno, and you can find me on Twitter at Obinna Speaks. I'm a software engineer at Gatsby.js. I'm also a media developer expert for Cloudinary, and I write a lot of technical articles. My friends like to call me an accessibility nuisance because I speak about accessibility, although I am from a country that doesn't really have so many laws guiding this. I try to advocate for it so people pay more attention. So before we begin, let's talk about where we are currently, where we are as an industry. How do we think of accessibility? How do we feel about it? In my opinion, 8 out of 10 people in a room often feel like accessibility is a feature that can be added later, and they think of it as sometimes not so important. They rank performance above it and feel like, yes, that's what we do the most important things, and accessibility comes in later. This tweet by Master Sutton says a lot about where we are currently as an industry. So Egghead tweets, what trend is currently being overlooked by developers? And Massey responds with, not a trend, but accessibility is frequently overlooked or forgotten despite our best efforts to educate and enlighten. I want to pick out parts of this Massey Sutton tweet and explain what is hidden in this less than 28 characters. Massey says accessibility is frequently overlooked, which is my point when I say our 8 out of 10 people would say that it is not as important. And saying despite our best efforts. So in my opinion, is just a bunch of advocates, self-acclaimed accessibility advocates like myself, trying to just say, hey, look, we want to get in touch with our human side as much as like we communicate with computers, and we're trying to make it possible for people to use this web. Would you listen to us? And I don't really think we should have accessibility advocates per se, because I feel like it should be part of us, but then until that becomes part of us, we're going to keep advocating for it. A bunch of other people have shared their opinion on accessibility. You can see like some tweets like accessibility is not an add-on. We talk about over engineering, but what about under engineering when we don't use like accessibility properly or like even care about performance? Some people tweet about what is accessibility, how can I help people get started? And there's a lot of like trends where different developers come together to just share their opinions and try to educate people on this. In my opinion, accessibility is as important, if not more important than performance, because people actually have to be able to use your product to see that your product is fast, right? And when I look at the industry, because we do not put too much importance to accessibility in most companies, in most companies like Accessibility Bank, there's a lot of depth. And this is how I see the industry. And really, a lot of people see it as so. And we've all had like the excuse of like, we don't have the time to put that. We don't have the experts for that. We don't have like all that time. This is just, it's a feature. We'll add it later. This is not our target market. We've all had all these excuses before. And this is my face when I hear those excuses, because it's not so much to be in touch with your human side and try to create like a platform that will be beneficial to a lot more users. And also, if you're in specific parts of the world, save yourself from being sued and legally attacked because somebody just thought it was too much. So now that I have your attention, let's think about what's missing in the process. There are a couple of things, in my opinion, that need to be present in your team to be able to have like some efficiency to care about accessibility. And the first one is a true sense of inclusion. We often throw this word around, and mostly, in my opinion, people don't know what inclusion means because inclusion always comes with diversity, and sometimes having you don't want to have a team that's just thinking the same way, because if everyone is agreeing on your team and everyone is like thinking the same way, it's probably because you have a very good agreeing team, or you just have a lot of people that think the same way and don't ever care for any other thing. So diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is asked to dance. I want to take this further to say, is the dance floor designed for everyone, or did the wheelchair ramp come afterwards? And this is because if we look at like current um our current ecosystem, most people build, especially when they think of accessibility, they say, okay, we're going to add it as a feature, as an add-on. We're going to put that later so that people can have that information like later. But in the actual sense of it, instead of thinking of creating websites in the accessible manner, why don't we think of making them in a universal manner? In a universal manner would give us like the idea of, say, for example, if you are going to, let's take it out of like the normal setting of computers. If you're going to create like handles for doors, instead of using like the round knobs, why not use the normal handles where people can actually turn them if they have limited usage of their arms? If you had like you're building having like a building, why not, instead of having like flights of stairs and people cannot get to the dance floor because like they can't go up those flights of stairs, why not have like a wheelchair ramp like built into those flights of stairs so that people can even go up? You can even create it for people that like to skateboard or ride their bikes to like these places so that they can get their bikes up there. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be in the space of someone we don't have anybody with a wheelchair, so we're not going to put in this ramp. I hope this makes sense. So let's try to think of like applications in the sense of a universal design and especially universal implementation of things, instead of just an accessible design and thinking of people with wheelchairs. The next thing I want to talk about is empathy. I believe that my personal view on empathy is that as an industry, we don't have a true sense of it. Hear me out. Because the average accessibility expert is older than the average web professional. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the age of anyone. All I'm saying is, as you grow, psychology has proven that as you grow, your sense of empathy tends to increase. And the reason for this is because when you're younger, you're trying to build for yourself. Like I would want to build like an application to solve like my personal needs. Everyone wants to build an application to solve their own itch. That's like the first rule of nature. Everyone wants to build for themselves. So there's a problem that you notice a problem and you're like, how can I solve this problem for myself? And then it becomes like okay, cool. How can I solve this for other people? How can I make a business out of this? The reason for that is naturally people are introspective in the sense that they look into themselves first to see how can I solve my problem. And if you want to have a true sense of empathy to be able to build applications for at scale for users that you've never met and users that have different use cases, the most important thing to know is your empathy might probably not be enough. And knowing this would help you get to like the next stage. Master Yoda would say, much to learn, you still have. Get all the views you can, build a diverse team, hire people from different walks of life, hire people from different backgrounds, talk to people from different backgrounds, get those ideas, get those, especially when you're trying to solve your own itch. Get those people, tell them, ask them questions like, oh, what's your immediate what's do you how do you see this problem? You get different views, you get different senses of empathy. Building your team. I know you might be wondering, what does building a team have to do with improving the web visually? Well, really, it does have a lot to do with that. The truth is, everyone on your team is part of your experience. When you are creating an application to solve the problems of the world or problems that you're trying to solve, everyone on your team is part of that experience. So you have from the product manager to the designer to the testers to the engineers, everyone in the life cycle of your product has a specific view that, if not seen properly, if not communicated properly, can throw away that the diverse communications that your team is trying to make, and also not have a true sense of empathy. And probably someone, let's say for example, if someone on your team doesn't agree with like the need to have accessibility because it takes a lot of time, you might probably have the accessibility person or advocate, i.e. me, on your team looking at that person like, whose side are you on? Are you playing for this team or are you playing for yourself? So building your team is really important. You need to have like people in your team that are trying to get to like the end goal, which is to make the web improve visually for everyone. Before we go any further, let's talk about the product. What goes into building the product? How do you gather like enough information to facilitate all these awesome things that I've said? The first thing I want to say is like, don't reinvent the wheel. Increase productivity with reuse. So especially in the beginning parts of like the design, picking like the design and like, implementations and how we're going to do this, people have come like a long way to see that it's the most frequent solutions are now widely adopted across industries, from aviation to like software. It's just use what is, make it better, but don't reinvent the wheel, because it is important to make sense of like affordances and also not um re also not change so much the conventions that is already. This would help like communicate properly what your application does. For example, you don't want to have like create like a new icon that no one, it's not intuitive, and it just creates a large problem. If you reinvent the wheel, literally you'd have like your customers trying to figure out what specific things are instead of paying attention to what your application is about. This is something that's really important to me, so I'm just going to put that there. Links should be used for navigation and buttons should be a call to action. Please do not use your buttons as links. I read in a book that, imagine if you turned off your lights, you were trying to turn on your lights in your room and found yourself in your kitchen. That would just be really not the experience you're looking for. So please, let's not do that. Do the right thing. Let's do the right thing when it comes to like picking conventions, picking stuff about your product, and just figuring out how different pieces fit in. Let's try to keep the conventions and also not, I'm not saying don't be creative, but like don't reinvent the wheel. You can turn a bicycle wheel to like an awesome wheel for like an automobile, but it's still a wheel. Can you solve all accessibility problems with the conventions or like with your product? No, no one can. But with the right amount of empathy, you can solve the problems particular to your own products and getting it right. Now, with research, the idea is to do like things the right way. Do not assume, actually go into the field and get information from actual users. Use that info to like create a knowledge base and also pay people for their time. Please pay people for their time. So when you're doing research, you can meet actual users, people that have like accessibility needs. You have to meet people that actually are living in the problem that you're trying to solve. Get their perspectives, get their opinions. This will make them part of like the process of the application. So when they see the solution, it actually makes sense to them, because this will be like a part of them, as an answered prayer or something to them. When you have done this research, learn from your research, create like an accessibility policy that's an onboarding doc for everyone joining your team, so that you never have to lose that the fire of like trying to make this accessible and as accessible as possible. Get that information and share with every member of your team, and let everybody embody what it means to actually create for this product. This would help drive like the right sense of empathy and collaboration in your team. Pay people for their time, and don't assume one person speaks for all. So if you probably are looking to create like an e-commerce site, you have to try to interview people with different levels of like color blindness, and also maybe people that have like limited amount of motion. Don't just interview one person and assume that the problem is going to be the same for every other person. Try to get that information. The more people that you can interview, the better. What do you do after you've built this application? Test. And now when it comes to testing, you can see that there can be two types of testing. You can see the awesome tips I have here. You can see that this one type of testing is testing by yourself. Test out your product. Actually use the product that you've built to see if it's accessible. Meet people that actually have like the problems you're trying to solve. Give them this product and try to monitor them to like see how they interact with this. And also, more especially, pay people for their time. Please pay people for their time. And then after you've built, like you have to maintain, keep it clean, keep updating, keep checking out, improving your knowledge, the knowledge base that you've gotten from research. Keep putting in like more time to people and listening, and then improving on what you have. I believe that we can build a web that accommodates everyone one piece of accessible code at a time. All we need to do is just sprinkle in a bit of love into like the code that we write every day. And I'm sure that we can make this industry more empathetic and more useful for everyone. Thank you also so much for coming to my talk, and may the force be with you. Happy to answer any questions. And yeah, chat to me on Twitter. Bye.
Wow, that was interesting. So I keep thinking of my inner Yuri here. Much enjoyed, I have that. But let me see if I can get Obinna himself on stage. I see he's in the back room. So let's see. We didn't get a chance to do a check with a tech check here, but let's keep our fingers crossed. All right, and there he is. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
How's it going?
Yeah, Obinna, that was a fantastic talk. Yeah. An interesting compliment to the talk we had before that.
Thank you.
So let's see if we got some questions. I think the audience is still warming up, but let's start with the question that I have posted.
Okay.
You mentioned in your intro that you live in a place that doesn't have a big culture of accessibility yet. And I'm wondering if that makes it easier or harder for your work, because I can imagine on one side there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, on the other side there is little acceptance of the topic.
Yeah. So it kind of makes it's a tricky situation because we don't have laws guarding like how we build products and stuff. I have made myself the accessibility nuisance. So like I chat to my friends. Like I have one scenario where a friend of mine did like a portfolio website and he had a lot of animations there, and I'm like, hey, could you please add like an option to not show these animations because it could trigger epilepsy or ADHD? And he's like, what's that? And then I have to keep like explaining, and but then I am happy to do so. So it's kind of it's hard, but then at the same time is the work is fulfilling, because like you get to every conversation is another opportunity to make somebody see that we can do better with the superpowers that we've been given, because yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So another question came in, so let me read it to you. What advice would you give to someone who is a freelancer working with a client about accessibility? Some clients might not want to have them included.
Yeah. So mostly I had worked as a freelancer, and I totally understand that, because like you need to explain to the client, oh, this is why. But to be honest, like if you start to just build out the product and maybe implement some semantic syntax while building, try to like just so the client really just wants to have this out, like just wants to have a product.
you're the one that's building the product, so you can actually just put in those things without having to like cross check with the client. But sometimes, so for example, when it comes to like stuff with like the color or the way the client might want some animations and all of those things, you can then explain. I mean, if you have a conversation with the client and explain why, and the why is always that, you know, you want more users. And most people, I know that like this is not the best way to sell some, like I don't like to sell accessibility to people this way, but then when it hits them in their pockets, they kind of pay attention. So when you tell somebody, oh, you can get sued if your application doesn't have like this kind, they'll be like, oh, for real? Or you say, hey, you can get more money if you have more users and you implement, because people will remember accessible platforms, you know? So like, so that's the way to like, so when, like I said, when people, there'll always be that question of what's in it for me, you know? So like, yeah, so when you tell people what's in it for them, they kind of care. And then before you know what's happening, it becomes second nature to them because they've always built this way and they'll keep building that way.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I also personally think accessibility isn't a binary feature. It's nothing that you can have only on and off. It's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
So any little addition helps towards the end goal.
Totally. Like it's not a race, it's a marathon. So you keep like adding little stuff there, here and there until like, you know, you just keep doing. A colleague of mine says deploy on Fridays and make it an accessibility fix. But yeah, don't deploy on Fridays.
Cool. Okay, we got a question from Pamela. That one I'm interested in as well. Which tools are available for web to help with accessibility? For Android, there's quite a lot, including reports and Play Store.
Yeah. So on web, you have like the Axe tool, which is a browser extension. I currently have them open. So I have like the Axe tool here, which is by DQ Systems. It's really good for testing out accessibility flaws and stuff to like kind of show you what's going on in your application. There's also Accessibility Insights, I think is a Microsoft tool, which is for the web. So it kind of like just tells you about the passes or the fails or where you could do better. There's also Lighthouse. Like Lighthouse literally just points out like all of those like little accessibility fixes that you need to make. There's also another tool here. I can't recall the name, but it's for and there's also a tool that this is a plugin that a developer made. So it's Maya Shavin from Cloudinary made like a tool for you to kind of play. So on you build a platform and you can kind of just set it into what someone that has color blindness would see, which is a really cool tool. I will find the name of the plugin and share, but then it kind of just, it shows you what a colorblind user is seeing. So if you have a lot of like colors and to you, this is red, but like when you put it in like that, when you play that scenario or you do that demo, you kind of just see that, oh wow, this is another color, and you're like, oh, okay, I should probably add like patterns and stuff to fix that. So there are multiple tools, and I mean, I tweet a lot about these tools and stuff, and I am happy to share these if I find like any more. But these are the ones I use. I use the Axe and Accessibility Insights and this other tool. I forget the name now. Oh yeah, it's called the Color Contrast Analyzer.
Cool. Now that helps a lot. I've used some of these tools myself, and I have to say it's quite eye-opening.
Yeah, I know. The first time I tested the site, so I did this thing where I went back to all the sites I had built before that were not accessible, and I started trying to fix all the problems. But like, you know, time, work, all of those. So I just at some point I started just removing some because I'm like, why would I do that? And my story with accessibility is like I started off writing semantic code without even knowing. So like I learned HTML with like, you know, using sections and navs and not just like doing a bunch of divs in like a box. And I didn't know what I was doing. And here I am now.
Cool. So you already dropped quite a few names and references there, but Maya is also asking for resources like blogs and books about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Any recommendations? So
I not too sure about like books on like diversity and inclusion, but like I know about books on accessibility. I am currently reading this. Let me just get this here. It's Accessibility for Everyone. Sorry. They have like a lot of books here. I have this book, which is super awesome. Accessibility for Everyone by Laura can't pronounce the last name. And then this other book by let me get this. Sorry. Yeah. But this one, Making Users Awesome. Yeah. So like I kind of just I can share like resources and like books to help people learn more about accessibility, but like my go-to resource is always the w3.org, because they have like some really hello. Oh, okay.
Yes. I hear
they have like some really cool like. Yeah.
All right. No. Okay. Now this sounds really good. Maybe we'll try to post the titles of at least the two books in the chat feature as well now. Make sure people can copy it out. It's such a good topic that I think a lot of developers are interested in this. So I think, let me have one more look at the QA. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have for now. So thank you, Obinna, so much for making yourself available here. I know you had a really packed day. I hope your other talk went well as well. It is absolutely DevFest Day, but thank you for making it. It's always nice to talk to the speaker in person. And for everybody, we have a slightly longer break, I think. And the next talk will be at 2 o'clock. Backstage people, please correct me if I'm wrong with that. No, I think that's correct. All right. So grab a coffee, relax, and then we'll see you here at 2 again.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.